Hey there, welcome to your Positive Energy Recharge. I'm your host, Jade Sterling, and I'd like you just to take this moment to imagine this. It's 9:15 p.m. You're at home on your own, the kids are in bed, and you've been waiting for your husband since 6 p.m. That's when he said he was going to be home. And he didn't arrive. Now you've called him numerous times, left a couple of messages, and he hasn't replied. You've sent him text messages, there's been no response. You've contacted some friends that you thought may know where he is, and you haven't had a reply from them either. And then you start to get worried, and you start getting heart palpitations, you start getting a bit sweaty and sticky in the palms, you start to feel nauseous, sick, and fearful and unsure about what step to take next. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, whether it's actually waiting for someone to arrive and you don't know where they are and you're concerned, whether it's just been a situation where you've had these symptoms, these feelings that have come on and you've just not known what to do, and a big portal of fear has opened up before you. What do you do with that? And I actually tell my clients that these opportunities are actually the perfect opportunities to heal. Now, it can be really hard to hear that when you're in the moment, but you'll hear me talking about this all the time, how fear is a portal. It opens up from a dimension of what you are right now, the current dimension of who you are and the existence of what is existing in this moment in time for you, into another dimension of yourself, to evolve, to become better, to actually drop a whole bunch of old stuff as you move through the portal of fear to then learn and grow and develop and conquer. So these are the times when now, never used to happen in the early days, but when I feel fear, I go, oh, okay, this is an opportunity. I no longer want to turn around and run the other way. I actually want to step in and go, okay, what version of myself am I going to become now? And I'm not saying it's easy, and it is scary, but it's the ability to be able to process your emotions in the moment, to move forward, to actually experience a positive outcome because of it. So if you stick with me, this is what I talk about over and over and over again, particularly for my perimenopausal women out there who really feel like that their hormones are driving them at the moment and they have no control. Their hormones are driving their emotions and their emotions are out of control. And when these feelings of fear come up, it's terrifying because you don't know what to do with it and you feel it's just going to swallow you up. And when you're in that moment, your nervous system's heightened, your body and your brain just want to protect you, defend you, keep you safe. And that's when we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That has evolved over time in my anatomy and physiology of the nervous system. It used to just be fight and flight. Now there is 4 different ways that we react as human beings. We fight, we flight, we freeze, or we fawn. And I'm going to go more into that as we go on. But just back to our scenario. And this person, who I can say at one point in time was me, was just in a state where there was so much fear I didn't know what to do with it. And I definitely coach people, particularly women, in these scenarios where there's so much fear about what's happening in their marriage, how they're actually addressing their parenting, what's happening in the workplace, so many different areas of life where the fear comes in and it's like, what do I do with that? What do I do with that big emotions? And one of the things that I help you do is to process big emotions. And that is so important, to be able to process them before you express them. Like, how many times have you been in a situation where someone has said or done something and you have reacted so instantaneously, and then later on you're like, oh, I wish I didn't react in that way. I wish I didn't just respond without thinking, and things possibly came out of your mouth that maybe wouldn't have if it had just that moment to think about. Now, I also talk about the gap that exists between your thoughts and your feelings and your actions. And so what we're trying to really master here is dropping into that gap so that we can make conscious choices as we go. So if you can process your emotion before you express it, that is when the portal is at its biggest. It's its biggest opportunity for you to consciously choose who you're going to be, what you're going to drop, and how you're going to conquer the situation. So look, in these emotional circumstances, the rational brain does step out of the room for the moment, because when you do go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, your rational brain, where the blood flow normally is at the front here, actually the blood flow moves to the back, to the more primitive part of the brain, whose job is just to keep you safe, to protect you and defend you. So often when people say to me, I don't know what I was thinking in that situation, it's like, you probably weren't. And so that's okay. We need to develop some self-compassion. And there is actually a self-compassion formula that is the perfect way for you to move through this portal of fear, to be able to get to the other side, to be able to grow and learn and experience a positive outcome from what feels like a negative emotion at the time. And so one thing that's really important for you to know is that, and I've talked about this before, when you have a thought and you believe that thought, it releases chemicals into your bloodstream. And those chemicals create a feeling. And the feeling is what you feel. It creates emotion. And that emotion tells your body what to do. But did you know that a feeling, once the chemical's been released into your bloodstream and you're experiencing the feeling can only actually be active in your body for 90 seconds. They've done research and studies, scientific trials on this, that chemicals released, your body will be able to process an emotion in 90 seconds. Now, if you actually experience that particular emotion longer than 90 seconds, then it's because you're releasing another thought, you're having another thought that's releasing more chemicals, that's sustaining that feeling, and it doesn't go away and it remains within your body. It becomes harder and harder to process the longer that it's in there. So how do we actually do this? How do we process it? How do we grab that thought or that feeling and be able to move through it in 90 seconds to be able to blast through the portal of fear and into the other side of personal empowerment? Well, the first thing actually is being aware that those chemicals only really last for 90 seconds unless you feed them another thought. So just having that awareness. And so I actually coach people to say, when you have a big emotion come up, in this particular case, fear, terror. What's another word that could probably be? It's fear of the unknown. So it's uncertainty. That's the word I was looking for. You have, just pick one feeling. Terror is a pretty big one, and it's a good one to actually work on because it seems very thick and very heavy and very dense. And we're going to talk about how we actually look at our emotions and what they feel like and how they feel on the inside and what the experience of that looks like. But when you feel a big emotion come up, often it happens quite quickly in my experience, from the toes all the way up to the top of my head. And I suddenly feel a big feeling that feels overwhelming and I don't know what to do with. Well, the first thing, if you can just get the awareness and find that moment to either start counting to 90, which we talked previously about certain techniques that don't seem to work when people have told you in the past, like you feel angry or you feel guilt or you feel frustration, you just count to 10. Counting to 10 is not going to get you very far, but counting to 90 will. Also, it depends on your motivation of counting to 10. If you're waiting for the feeling to move without having to do the rest of the processing, that's another story. So either count to 90 or grab your mobile phone or a timer that may just happen to be handy wherever you are in that place and time. Sometimes these things don't happen conveniently, do they? That's why the counting is an option. But sometimes it can be an option to grab your phone. We all have our phones with us nowadays, and set a timer for 90 seconds. And just know by the time you get to the 90 seconds, you have the ability to move through this emotion and then be able to relax the nervous system, let the blood flow move from the front back, from the back to the front, frontal lobe, your frontal cortex, and then to be able to rationally think about what steps you're going to take next. And during this 90 seconds, I ask you to do 3 things. 1, name the emotion. Name as it comes up. Oh, this is terror. This is fear. This is uncertainty. It could be any emotion. This is shame. This is anger. Say it out loud. This is anger. This is shame. This is terror. And then you greet it. It's the second thing you do. You say, hello, terror, I see you. I see you. Come on in. It's okay. I've got me. You greet the emotion. Come on in, anger. I see you. I see you, anger. Come on in. Come on in, uncertainty. I see you. I see you. It's okay. I got me. Come on in. And you greet them in. And then you need to do your breathing, which we've talked about before. Just 3. Inhale in through your nose, like you're smelling your favorite scented flower. And exhale out through the mouth, like you're blowing out a birthday candle. And you do that 3 times. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. That should take you 90 seconds. Have a play with it. See how it works for you. Over time, you'll find that you get quicker and quicker and quicker at it. And you can feel on the inside how your nervous system is dialed down. And then you can practice step 4, which is the self-compassion formula. Now, I highly recommend you write this down. If you've ever read the book, Write It Down, Make It Happen. I have just recommended this book so many times in my life, and I'll continue to do so. It's really about goal setting and about achieving desired outcomes, but I use it in so many things in my everyday life. Writing things down is so powerful. If you are in a position to do so, you need to write it down. You need to write down the name of your emotion: terror, anger. Fear is okay. It's a bit general. It's okay if you're in the midst of it and you don't know how else to pull it apart, but as specific as you can get at these times is so beneficial. Write down the name of your emotion. Terror. Hi, terror. I see you. It's okay. I've got me. You can come in. And then you've done your breathing. The self-compassion formula actually came from a celebrity coach that I did a little bit of work with called Whitney Hewlin, and you look her up. She actually teaches people how to use people's attention to be able to use that as a resource to be able to make a massive positive impact in the world. And she mainly teaches this to celebrities because these are the people who want to be seen to be able to go out there into the world and make a massive impact. But it's really applicable to everyone. And we did a little bit of work together and I found her work so beneficial. And she taught me the self-compassion formula. Write this down. If you're taking notes, this is the time to write it down now. So it's a couple of sentences and you fill in the blank. The self-compassion formula is, of course I am feeling, and then you name your emotion. Of course I'm feeling terror. You can make it into a way that makes sense for you. Of course I'm feeling terrified. Of course I'm feeling fill in the blank. It makes sense because, and then you fill in a rational explanation for why you think you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And then the last part of that is, it makes sense because, rational explanation. And then what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do next? Of course I'm feeling blank. It makes sense because blank. And blank. What are you going to do now? So in this particular case, of course I'm feeling terrified or terror or scared. It makes sense because my mind doesn't have all the answers right now and I don't even know why he's not home or why he hasn't called or notified me as to where he is 3 hours later. I understand that the unknown causes fear and there's nothing I can do in this moment but pray and trust. Now that may not be the most logical thing that your brain is happy with to be able to resolve the situation, but you'll find that your nervous system responds to that because it knows that you are taking care of it by choosing to do an action in response to the reason why you've chosen rationally that you feel that way. I had a client who really struggled with yelling at her kids. I think we all have that at some point in some time. But this particular time was tying up shoelaces. It was her trigger. She was like, I just snap. It's just they spend so long and then they have to find their socks and we leave the shoes till right before we need to go out the door. So it's the time that I'm my most heightened. I'm in my biggest hurry and I have to get out the door. And I say, have you got your shoes on? They go, yeah, Mum. And then they never actually and then I'm like, where are your shoes? No one's got their shoes on. And then I just snap and I yell and I completely lose my temper. And she felt like she was overreacting. Can you relate to that? She felt like she was overreacting, but it was just a pattern that was over and over and over again. And I can feel it in my body because I've been there many times before. So I said to her, let's use the self-compassion formula. Of course I'm feeling frustrated. She said, hello, frustration. Come on in. She'd done the work before. Of course I'm feeling frustrated. It makes sense because I have an expectation that things will go a certain way and they never do. That's the and for her. And they never do. Well, that gave her freedom to realize that, oh, I have an expectation and that expectation is never met. Perhaps I should change my expectation. And then just getting the curiosity to think about that activated the frontal lobe of her brain, and she was able to calm down, dial down the nervous system, start to think about what other expectations she might have that might not be serving her right now, what other expectations that might be possible for her children to live up to. And going from there is where we just unravel. We find solutions to problems that are just driving us insane, you know. And so the last thing that I want to mention for this video is sometimes if you get stuck in the feeling, like terror is a big one. I feel terrified. Hello, terror. Welcome in, terror. That's a big one, right? Sometimes shame is a big one for people. Anger can be like, they're all as big as we make them, but they're all heavy emotions that I find are the primary reason that people come to see me, because they don't know what to do with them. And they can feel so violent on the inside that you know that it's not healthy for you in any way. Regardless of how it's presenting on the outside, the feelings on the inside feel like they're doing damage as well. And look, it's a whole other video as to sometimes disease comes from disharmony in the body, which comes from emotions that are not being able to be expressed and processed properly. But in this case, big emotion comes in, hello, terror, okay, you don't feel safe, where you're like, okay, what does this feel like in my body? It feels, and from my own experience of terror, I remember feeling was just like a big round sponge in my chest. And if I squeezed it, like black and grey kind of dirty water would come out, and then it would blow back up to a big sort of sponge. It sounds very visual, but the fact that I was able to visualize that feeling of terror helped me to realize that, oh, this is big and icky and it comes out. And of course I feel this way because someone I love, or an emotion a positive emotion that I feel in a different way in this part of my body, is actually creating conflict within me. And then being able to talk about it and imagine myself feeling it and touching it, it started to dissolve. It wasn't so scary, it wasn't so big. And I'm like, that's just a thing that's there. It can only last for 90 seconds if I let it. Let's count to 90 and see if I can do my breathing. You might find that you want to play with that. I had a client who experienced anger a lot, and I was like, couldn't get past anger. Lots of anger. In fact, all of our coaching ended up being just about anger management for 6 whole weeks during the positive energy circuit, which is the 6-step process where I teach you actually how to master your emotions, and to, particularly at the moment, for perimenopausal women to hack their hormones and become high-level, highly powered hormone hackers that just rock their own world. But it's also about general emotion regulation, where this particular client was just experiencing so much anger, he couldn't get past it. And eventually I was like, okay, all right, how does that feel in your body? And it was like fire, fire, my body is on fire. And I said, okay. And so we actually did a visualization where the fire was all around, from inside of the body all the way outside of the body. And then we just did a nice visualization over time where we just brought it down till it just became a little fire in the center of the chest. And then that's when we've got something to work with. We're like, what are we going to do with that? Of course you're feeling like that. You're feeling like that because it makes sense, because you've been feeling like that for a really long time. And so from here on in, we're actually going to process our anger before we express it. And that becomes liberating. That becomes the part that sets you free. So that is your 90 seconds to processing big emotions. You set your timer or you count. You name the emotion, you say it out loud, you acknowledge it, you invite it in, and then you write down, of course I feel blank. It makes sense because rational thought. And what are we going to do next? And from that process, you'll find that you will surprise yourself in processing your emotions and expressing them, and your relationships with other people, as well as yourself, will completely change. I look forward to hearing how you're putting this into practice. I'd love to see some comments down below about how this practice has actually worked out for you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.